This is the second stool leg that we're going to talk about. Now, this is pretty straightforward. If we're not earning what we want to, then practice flat out isn't going to work. You'll never be able to afford the team, the support, and the tools that you want. You'll end up becoming needy for new business. And the moment we become needy, we feel like we then need to start to convince people to work for us. We've lost the game. Being needy is repulsive. It repels people. There's nothing more attractive than somebody that isn't needy. They're authentic. We see them in different ways, whether it's friends and our significant other there too, particularly in nowadays where inauthenticity is rampant. When we find that person that owns themselves, where there is a level of authenticity in there, then it's very, very attractive. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your impact, your income, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, I want to share with you, I want to take you on a little bit of a journey, and I want to share with you what I wish I had known about running a chiropractic practice 15 years ago, the lessons I learned along the way. The key idea I want you to get from this is that for a practice to be sustainable, i.e. we want to work there for a long time, there are three essential ingredients, okay? And if we're missing just one of these, then practice just flat out doesn't work. In fact, you can think of these like the three legs on a three-legged stool. It's not just a matter of we're missing them, but if they're there in different proportions, then this stool becomes unsustainable, and unstable, and that's a practice that's unsustainable, okay? So what does it look like when a practice doesn't work? For those of you that might be feeling bored or unfulfilled, stressed, maybe burnt out, overwhelmed, or unrewarded, then today's episode is going to be really helpful for you because I'll help you identify why that might be the case. Chances are you're missing one of these three ingredients, or they're there in different amounts there. So let's go back about 15 years ago in practice, and there was a lot that was really working for me. From a volume point of view, we were adjusting a lot of people. The practice was seeing, by myself, somewhere between 400 and 450 people a week. We were making a really great impact. So we were seeing families in practice, and there was miracles happening in our practice each and every week, like I'm sure there is in your practice. And we're really starting to develop a reputation in the community for a family chiropractic practice. We were running great community events. We were doing Easter egg hunts and weekly workshops. And in terms of impact in our community, we're really breaking through. But there was something that was missing. And it took me a long time to work out why I wasn't feeling satisfied. And it showed up for me in the early phases there as almost a sense of burnout, like I was feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. And after beginning to poke around, what I realized is the first thing that was missing is that I wasn't feeling financially rewarded. Now, you might think, Angus, hang on, if you're adjusting a lot of people, why were you not feeling financially rewarded? The reason is I was giving away my care way too cheap. We were doing yearly fees at that stage. I was making a bunch of deals with a lot of different people because I just wanted people under chiropractic care. I was helping many people as possible, but it was coming at the expense of me. I just flat out wasn't feeling financially rewarded for the effort and the energy that I was putting in. The second thing that was missing was that my practice just wasn't enjoyable. There was something missing, and I'll talk to you about what that something missing was in a little while. Now, I wasn't able to kind of put this together as quickly and as clearly as I have with you now. But those three elements that I want to talk about there too is for a practice to be sustainable, there needs to be impact. There needs to be meaning, okay? We had a lot of that. There needs to be income. We were missing out on that. And there needs to be enjoyment. There wasn't enjoyment in my practice because of some fundamental reasons also, okay? So this is what I'm going to talk about in this episode here. I'm going to talk about impact. I'm going to talk about income and enjoyment. We'll talk about what they look like when they're being done right. I'll talk about what mistakes that we make, and I'll give you some action steps that you can take moving forwards. This took me several years to identify all of these. The impact thing was not a problem for me. Many of my mentors had told me about the importance of purpose in practice and vision, and we worked really hard on that, okay? So impact, let's talk about that first of all. Are we doing work that's making a difference in the world that's meaningful to us? Okay, so there's two elements to that. We want it to be beyond just us, but it has to be meaningful to us. So this is very personal. There's loads of crusades that the world needs. There's animal cruelty, there's child trafficking, there's literally thousands of social causes that are begging for support. But we want one that's meaningful for us. And whilst we need to be aware and supportive of many of these, we want to find out the one that we're called to. Now, for many chiropractors, this has something to do with health. And if it doesn't have anything to do for health for you, if you find that you're being called in another direction, then possibly it's time for you to get out of chiropractic and into something else. There's no shame in that. I believe we need to be called in the direction where there is impact for us. Now, how does this show up for us as chiropractors? How do we end up in a practice where there's no meaning? Okay, so here's a couple of examples. If your passion is to look after kids in practice, but you're stuck in a chronic pain practice, then you're going to be missing out on impact. However, if you're seeing kids because everybody tells you that you should, but you'd love to be looking after professional couples or maybe athletes, then you're going to be missing impact. Now, often I see chiropractors working with patients that aren't meaningful for them. Now, I've been through many phases of this myself. And so finding those people that are meaningful for you can take time, and often there needs to be different iterations of it. When I was in chiropractic college, for me, it was all about athletes. I wanted to be, I had a vision in the back of my mind that I wanted to be the chiropractor for the Australian cricket side. And so as I got out, I started to upskill in those areas. I really started to get some traction, but as it turned out, it was with our Olympic swimmers. I was looking after a number of those. But there came a time when it was devoid of meaning for me. I felt that there are several reasons looking after these peeps. First of all, none of them wanted to pay. It was a privilege to look after these elite athletes, and you should see it as a privilege, and they certainly shouldn't have to pay. Many of them were chronically sick, and what they really needed was a rest and some time out of the support. But that's not what often works at elite level there too. And so there's several different reasons that this wasn't fulfilling me. And at the same time, I certainly had families that were coming in to get care for me. And these families were super respectful of my time. They listened to my advice. They were easy to deal with. They weren't prima donnas. And I went, why am I giving all my time away over here for nothing and very little reward, other than maybe some photographs to put up on my, on my walls, when I've got these families over here who love to pay me and respect me for my time? And so I began to transition out of a really heavily sports-focused practice into a family subluxation vitalistic wellness practice. Now, as my time went on in practice, I started to move further again, where I began to not enjoy looking after little babies like I used to. Now, this didn't mean that I didn't see importance and value in kids getting chiropractic care. I just didn't want to be the delivery mechanism of it. Now, luckily for me, I always had great associates. At the end there, I had the amazing Kirby Collins, who was a gifted pediatric chiropractor. And I could just send all the little kids and babies over to her, and I liked looking after the older kids and certainly the adults. So I was able to maintain meaning in that practice and look after the people that I really enjoyed to look after, okay? Now, meaning is one of those things that's fundamentally important to us as human beings. We need to have something bigger than ourselves, and if we don't, then often there's a level of just enjoyment and sustainability in practice that won't exist for you. Now, finding out where we get meaning can be a challenge. And I often ask people to start with 3 different questions to ask themselves. Who do you like helping? So for me in the early days, I really loved helping athletes. And then I liked helping families. And then I liked helping kind of professional people. So that's the best spot for you to start. Like, where do you like to spend your time? The second question is who can you help to get results for? Because if you, for instance, really love looking after kids, but you're not skilled in helping them get results, then there's going to be a lack of meaning. This is going to cause a lot of stress and frustration. The third question to ask is who can actually pay for your services? Unless you're running a not-for-profit business, then it's important that people be able to actually afford their care. We make practice way more difficult. Now, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't have scholarship cases. We absolutely had that, but we wanted to target and work with people who could afford our care, and that allowed us to give a certain amount of care away afterwards. So what are some of the mistakes that we make? Well, the first one, as I mentioned before, mistake is that we end up focusing on an area of practice that's just flat out not meaningful for us. This can happen when we buy a practice that might have a niche and a target market that it's known for in that community, and we think that we can kind of just swap it over, and that certainly can and does happen. This can happen when we don't take time to actually clarify who we want to work with. We find out that we just want to work with everybody, but that rarely works also. Well, this can happen when we follow in the footsteps of a mentor or a teacher that's all about one particular area of practice, but the end result is we end up working in a practice that's not meaningful for us, the two. The second mistake that we make in here that robs us of impact is that we don't upskill ourselves to help these people get results. We're just not technically proficient. So my gorgeous wife, Lauren, our practice there is all about looking after kids. And Lauren's skills as a chiropractor, unrecognizable from mine when it comes to looking after kids. She understands things, assessments, and has a whole bunch of tools that helps kids in a way that I never could. when it comes to kind of helping perhaps their mums and dads and delivering care there, I'm very confident, I'm very certain in my ability to be able to get a result with people. But we need to be able to make sure that we have the skill set. So Ben, the chiropractor I see at the moment, who's helping me, I just had a knee arthroscopy and a meniscus tear repaired, and I had a session with Ben yesterday, and he was amazing. The depth of knowledge that he knew in directing me to what I needed to focus on and helping to put together a rehab program. Ben's focus is helping CrossFit athletes. Ben's focus is helping kind of, athletes, whether they be weekend warriors, be at their best. And so he has a skill set that really matches that, okay? So we need to make sure, second, is that we have the skill. The third mistake that we make is that, okay, we clarify who it is that we want to look after. We've got the skills to do that, but then we don't understand how to market to these people. And because we don't have a skill set to market to these people, our practice just ends up with dribbles of people from all different kinds. So we don't know how to go out into our community, reach the people that we want to be talking to and bring them in and help them to get results. We kind of just leave it to this idea that if I just help people get well, the referrals will look after themselves. And that's a recipe for disaster. So some action steps, if you're missing impact in your practice, if you want to have a practice that's sustainable, you must clarify where you want to have impact and meaning, okay? Who are the people that you want to be looking after? What are the results that you want to see? And this takes some time, okay? And again, you might not get it right to begin with. I certainly didn't. I started off with sports peeps, and then I moved to families, and then finally I kind of focused on professional couples at the end there, okay? Remember this though, here's what's important. Meaning alone won't build your practice. I had that in my practice to begin with, tremendous meaningful, okay? It used to move me on a weekly basis of the results that we were seeing. I love the people I was looking after, but what was missing for me was the second of those ingredients, and that is income, okay? I wasn't having the income. I wasn't getting the output that was matching the input. So this is the second stool leg that we're going to talk about. Now, this is pretty straightforward. If we're not earning what we want to, then practice flat out isn't going to work. You'll never be able to afford the team, the support, and the tools that you want. You'll end up becoming needy for new business. And the moment we become needy, we feel like we then need to start to convince people to work for us. We've lost the game. Being needy is repulsive. It repels people. There's nothing more attractive than somebody that isn't needy. They're authentic. We see them in different ways, whether it's friends and our significant other there too. There's particularly nowadays where inauthenticity is rampant, when we find that person that owns themselves, where there is a level of authenticity in there, then it's very, very attractive, okay? Now, if we're not getting the income that we want, it can be incredibly soul-destroying because we know we've got something to offer our community. We see the changes that our work delivers. We see other chiropractors taking amazing holidays, living in their fabulous homes, driving their fancy cars, and yet this always seems to be out of our reach. When this happens, it will slowly, sometimes not so slowly, but it will surely begin to break you down. So the mistakes that we make this, and I see chiropractors making, is that we just settle for less. What happens is they set goals, or a vision for the practice is just enough to get by. If I'm just paying my bills, if I can live a good enough life, then that will be okay. And when we settle for less and we stop striving to serve our community in bigger ways there too, ultimately you'll build a practice that's unsustainable. The second mistake that we make is that we way underestimate what's possible. On a weekly basis, I'm interviewing potential clients to see whether or not I think a community influencer is a fit for them. And part of that interview process, I want to know what is their vision for their practice. Not where they are right now, but where would they like to be in 2 years' time? If they decided that we were a fit to work together in community influencer, what would they like to see in 24 months' time? And so we talk about what is the income that they want to have. And then as a part of that, what I do is I reverse engineer what that would look like in terms of new patients they need to bring in. What would it look like in terms of retention and daily flow? Now, almost without a doubt, when we go through this, there will be an aha moment where they'll look at me and go, wow, that's actually a lot easier than I thought. They don't take the time to reverse engineer what the income is that they desire. So we kind of leave it out there like a wish to a genie, okay? Moving on to the third point is that we don't invest the time and the money in the training and the system to support our income goals. So our university does a great job at helping us to qualify the basics of chiropractic, but it doesn't teach us how to run a business. We need to develop, a CEO mindset. We need to develop a financial acumen. We need to be spending time working in our practice and not on our practice. Sorry, other way around. We need to be time working on our practice and not in it. And this is something that many of us challenge with. So If we're looking for some areas that we need to get kind of book smart on, here's 10 of them where you would need to begin, okay? You need to really understand strategic vision. You need to know how to communicate a clear long-term vision for the practice. This needs to be able to communicate it to staff and to some extent to your practice members as well. This will involve setting kind of measurable goals and action plans to achieve them. You're going to need to understand the basics in around leadership and team building. Okay, so it's one thing for us to lead our practice members, but it's another for us to lead team members. Okay, now these team members might just be not only internal, but they're accountants and bookkeepers. They're marketing teams, they're all those kind of things too. We need to understand the finances. So there needs to be a financial acumen, understanding financial statements, budgeting, cash flow management. Okay, we need to know how to make data-driven decisions to ensure that the practice remains profitable and sustainable. Operational efficiency, okay? So systems and process that streamline the operations. We need marketing and patient acquisition. We talk a lot about that here. We need to be focusing on improving flow of the patient experience. This means prioritizing patient satisfaction, building strong relationships. You need to have a real skill set in around innovation and adaptability. So this is staying informed around industry trends. Where are things going? What is the next big thing in chiropractic that you need to be aware of? And all this needs to happen in the confines of knowing how to manage work-life balance. If we do all of this and exhaust ourselves in the process, that's not going to work. And then on top of this, we need to know things about legal and compliance. And then there needs to be constant learning and development. Okay, so they're just 10 categories there that you can see might sound like a lot because they are. But this is the price that we have to pay if we want to build a sustainable practice, particularly one that rewards you with a really tremendous income, okay? The other mistake that we make, and I see this mistake in those people that have a really great income, is that we wrongly assume that a practice that makes a lot of money will solve all of the problems, okay? Money and income solves money problems, but there are many challenges that we have in our practice that are not money problems, and trying to use money to solve a non-money problem there too is a recipe for disaster. And this moves me on to the final of these three categories, and that is enjoyment. Practice can and absolutely should be fun. Now, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. As I mentioned before, I'm speaking with chiropractors from around the world on a daily basis, and it's sad how few of these chiropractors, when I ask them how's practice at the moment, how few of them actually tell me that it's fun. When I ask them, use the words to describe what's going on, very few of them. Now, I realized that my practice had stopped being fun, as I mentioned before, and the reason for me is it became inauthentic. I love the people. I had meaning. Yes, I needed to work on the income and needed to restructure my fee options there too. But I was running my practice the way somebody else wanted to run it. It was my coaches and my mentors along. It was their sustainable practice. It wasn't mine. This meant that I needed to do some soul searching, and I needed to find out where was the incongruence, okay? I needed to figure out ways to infuse me back into the practice because, as I mentioned beforehand, it lacked inauthenticity. So I will chat to chiropractors and they'll tell me that they're not dressing in the way they want to dress. They're not showing up communicating. They want to hug their patients, but they're scared to. They want to wear ripped jeans and T-shirts to work, but instead they're turning up in a shirt and tie. When you set it up properly, practice can and should be one of the highlights of your week. Now, there have been a couple of incredibly stressful times in my life, and during these periods, practice has been an absolute respite for me. If I think back to, there was a time where I was the president of the Victorian branch of the Chiropractors Association, and we were going through some really heavy challenges with the registration board where they were trying to minimize the availability of chiropractors to see kids. The consequences of this could have been really devastating for us as chiropractors. I was working a bunch of hours. There was just a lot of stress and anxiety and anger and everything all and around that. And during those times there, the ability for me to go into work those 3.5 days and just leave everything on the door and serve people and love on them and just enjoy it there was medicine for me. It was fulfilling in a way that nothing else could be. Nowhere else was able to replenish me like practice did. There was an enormous amount of enjoyment there too. The second time that my practice showed up like this for me was when I was going through my divorce. Again, there was a lot of emotional turmoil in around that and new identities. But at the same time, for me to go into practice and think about serving the people there was absolute heaven for me, okay? So going to see the people, going into practice, it should be fun. And if it's not fun, then you need to go about ways to make it fun again. So the mistakes that we make is that as I mentioned, the biggest one is that we run the practice, or we're not running the practice the way that we want to run it. We think that there's only one way to run a practice. In essence, that's what I'm trying to say there. And this happens when we have coaches and we're part of support groups, or we're going along to seminars and we have charismatic people up on the stage who are telling us this is the right way to run a practice. Now, I'm going to tell you here, there's no one right way to run a practice. There are plenty of wrong ways, okay? But if we're using somebody else's blueprint, if you're wearing a tie because you think that's what's necessary, if you're doing reports this way, if you're doing prepays and you don't want to do prepays, or vice versa as well. If you're using somebody else's script and playbook, okay, this is a recipe for inauthenticity, okay, and this is a recipe for a lack of enjoyment. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be learning from people, okay? And I like to talk to community influencers about 2 phases for this. I like to talk about adopt, then adapt. So if I'm going to teach them a way to do something, maybe it's how to manage an adjustment visit, or maybe a re-exam. Here's some things to start to implement. And then what I want you to do is I want you to adapt it to a way that really meets you. Remember that in our communication, there are 2 really important parts of this. There's the message, what we say, and then there's also the messenger. And when there's not alignment between the message and the messenger, then this is one of the things that's going to lead to a lack of enjoyment in practice. All right, let's sum all this up, folks. If you're to have a practice that's not only successful but sustainable, one that you want to continue to work in for a long, long time there too, if you want to make sure that you're moving away from emotions like overwhelm and stress and burnout and boredom and marauded, then you need to assess your practice and look at these 3 pillars, these 3 ingredients there too. Do I feel like I'm having an impact? Is there meaning in the work that I'm doing? Am I making a difference to the type of people that I want to make a difference to? Okay. The second thing is to look at income. Am I feeling fairly rewarded? Have I set my goals too low? Is the output of the practice, is it matching the input that I've put back in there? And the third one to look at is enjoyment. Am I enjoying this? And if I'm not enjoying this, why not? Am I playing somebody else's game? Am I showing up in a way that's not authentically me? When we get aligned between impact and income and enjoyment, we meet the holy grail of practice. You're in a spot where it doesn't feel like you're going into work most of the time. It feels like an absolute gift. And when it feels like a gift to you, it'll feel like a gift to the people in your community. And then we get this positive momentum where our practice often effortlessly grows as well. Folks, that's it for this episode. The thing that I wish I understood 15 years ago is a practice needs to be built on 3 things: impact, income, and enjoyment. And when you get all those aligned and level out and balanced, then you've hit a really sweet spot. Folks, until next time, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. I'll see you back here next week. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.